Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Buck McKeon. Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me.
All right, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta has said this could result in something he termed a doomsday scenario. Just how worried are you about these cuts if they go into effect?
Well, I think, as he said earlier, this is not like shooting ourselves in the foot. It's like shooting ourselves in the head. I think if people understand that we have already cut, that will be in next year's budget, almost $500 billion, and then the sequestration of another $500 billion or more on top of it, means that going forth in the next 10 years, we would be cutting an average of $100 billion a year out of the defense budget, which means in the outlying years, we'd be cutting the defense budget in half. I think those who understand the importance of protecting our nation's defense, those who understand how important it is to protect the troops, and those who carry out that mission of protecting our nation, need all the help that they can get. They need the support to be able to carry out their missions with the least possible danger and be able to return home to their families safely.
The President has said that he will veto any attempt to go around the sequestration as it now stands, and that may be resulting in direct response to the $1.2 trillion. Do you think, though, within that monetary number, there is a way to reconfigure what's going to happen with defense cuts?
I've directed the committee staff to craft legislation that meets the following criteria. Number one, it has to be one that we can get through the Congress quickly. We don't have a year to debate this issue. Number two, it needs the President's signature, not his veto. And number three, it needs to meet the criteria that was passed in the Budget Deficit Reduction Act. We need to meet the savings, but we need to do it in a way that will not cut the troops and the veterans.
So are you going to make suggestions that cuts be made elsewhere? Can you tell us anything about some specific portions of the legislation that may go to that end?
We are putting together legislation, and we will have specific areas that we could recommend for cut. Staff is working on many of those things right now as we speak. But the important thing that I think we really need to do is make sure that we do no further cuts after the cuts that are already being worked on by the Secretary and the chiefs that they were assigned to do in a talk by the President last year to cut over $400 billion out of our defense. They're working on that. But when people understand how deep those cuts are and then figure what these new cuts on top of that would be, I think the American people will say no more. That's too much. Enough was enough. If we're talking about cutting 100,000 of our Army and Marines in uniform, taking them out of end strength, cutting back a carrier task force, possibly another BRAC. I mean, these are some pretty drastic cuts. We're talking also, we don't use defense to create jobs, but we have to understand that jobs are a side benefit. We have a strong workforce that builds the things that our military needs. And we have civilians that work in the Defense Department, and we have our military uniformed personnel. We're looking at, with the cuts that were already being brought forward next year, almost $500 billion, we're looking at probably in excess of 600,000 jobs. That, in our economy, the way it's running right now, decreases our ability to defend our nation and other hot spots around the world. Look at what's happening in Egypt. Look at what happened last year in Korea. Look at what's happening in Iran. I think we need to understand that the world is not getting safer. And even though we've historically drawn down our military after every conflict, this is the first time that we've drawn it down while our troops are fighting and are outside the mission right now while we speak, carrying out patrols in Afghanistan.
Of course, we wouldn't have to talk about these sequestration cuts if the Super Committee had reached a deal. One of the sticking points was this issue of raising taxes or raising revenue. I want to point out something you said back in September, speaking before the American Enterprise Institute. You said if it came that I only had two choices, one was a tax increase, one was defense cut over and above where we already are, I would go to strengthen defense. Is that still your position? Would you be open to any kind of tax increase at the behest of saving defense?
I think that is a false choice. I think there are many places we can find cuts without increasing taxes, and I think that's what we ought to really have our focus on. With a government that is spending so much in so many areas, I just think that the Americans we don't have a tax problem, we have a spending problem. And while I said that after that speech in response to a question, I think it's very important that we focus on places where we can cut back, and defense has been on the table. We've already cut, as I said, almost $500 billion. We'll see these cuts roll out after the first of the year. I'm just saying that sequestration was set up to be so onerous. President Obama and Senator Harry Reid said that these cuts were made to be painful. Well, we shouldn't put any more pain on our military. We should find other places to make these cuts.
Chairman McKeon, we thank you for your time tonight. We will watch for that legislation on the Hill.
Thank you, Shannon.
Well, a Russian newscaster makes a very